Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 2013 Suffolk County Council on Environmental Quality Monthly Meeting. I welcome you all to the meeting, and just a reminder, this is a public meeting. If the item you wish to speak about is up on the agenda, you're more than welcome to speak. Okay, first on the agenda are minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read the July 2013 minutes?
Lori, I read them. I had a couple of small typos that Christine corrected. Aside from that, I think that she caught the essence of everything. I didn't see any changes.
Anybody else have any comments? Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Seconded by Mary Ann. All in favor? Motion passed.
I abstain.
I abstain. You weren't here, and Eva abstained. She wasn't here. All righty. Correspondence. Suffolk County Department of Parks letter regarding appointing Mary Ann Spencer as a member of the request for expression of interest. Evaluation Committee in connection with Resolution 918-2011, establishing a historic structure restoration pilot program and directing the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Conservation to issue a request for proposals. Did everyone have a chance to read that? Okay. Is everyone in agreement with me? Yes, this is a wonderful thing to have Mary Ann do this?
Yes, she's well qualified.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the Historic Trust document. Mr. Martin, what do you have?
Good morning. No news is good news with the housing, in the sense that all of our buildings and our apartments are full and rented at this time, and the contracts we're still working on. There's no change in that. We're still working on the Saginaw Coast contract, the Maritime Museum contract, and a few others that have not progressed. What I also want to report is that Deep Wells, we're working on the sprinkler system inside the house, the fire sprinkler system, and that project is continuing into September. And because of the length of the project, the Historic Society there, the Deep Wells Farm Historic Society, has not been able to meet in the building or do their work. So they've decided this year to cancel the fall fair, which I know is a big deal in that community and that area. They do plan to sponsor it again next year, but this year, because of the house being closed down really the whole year, they haven't been able to be on site. And so their planning hasn't happened. And, yes.
Question, is this a new system or an old system?
It's a completely new system, and it's taken double the amount of time for the installation to be completed than was planned.
I'm curious, how come?
Just
technical problems, or?
Technical and problems getting the materials and both those things.
I used to go to the Fall Festival, as you know.
Yeah, well, that's our largest event at our historic site. It's very popular
too near it,
in the community. Just so everyone understands, it will come back next year. And otherwise, our other sites, all their events are continuing.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, project review. Recommended unlisted actions. A, proposed acquisition of land by the County of Suffolk for open space preservation purposes, known as the William and Antoinette Smith property located in the Swan River County Park area, town of Brookhaven. Good morning, Loretta.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Before you this morning is an acquisition along the Swan River in East Patchogue, town of Brookhaven. It's 1.6 acres in size. It contains wetland, DEC title wetland property, about more than approximately half of the property, and buffer area as well. It's adjacent to other county holdings in green on the map before you. We have been acquiring parcels along this river corridor for a number of years, and hope to continue to fill in the blanks and complete our acquisitions along this tributary. We have properties both on the master list as well as the list that was generated under the old Greenways program. We then put a resolution, plan steps resolution after that program ended to continue to acquire properties along that stream corridor, as well as others. So this is one of those properties, and we'd like to request that you review it and give us the okay.
First off, a comment, Loretta. I like the graphics on the map. We've sometimes been missing this stuff, especially along water features. For the first time, we're really able to key in on what we're looking at, from fresh marsh, high marsh, intertidal marsh, etc. So, possibly in the future, when we have a project like this, it would be really nice to have that kind of information. Sometimes it's hard to figure out. You just got to go by the aerials.
That's why we're attempting to do this.
That's great. The second, and this is just a question, it looks like on the east side of the river it's somewhat less developed. I guess that's, is there a reason for that aside from the fact that the wetlands are okay? I would presume at one time there were wetlands on both sides.
Yes. I can't say why exactly one side or the other.
I was just curious.
No, there's no particular reason that I'm aware of.
Listen, if it's an existing wetland and that's what we're trying to buy, I'd never have a problem with that.
Yeah, I have a question about the house that's right south of the proposed acquisition. It looks like that's part of the in-process planning, or house or structure. I'm not sure if it's that. Looks like a house.
Actually, it's it was originally on our list, but the house was built. So after we created that list, we wouldn't recommend buying that at this point.
All right, so because then.
Yeah, because there's some lines on here which sort of look like it's an in-process planning.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if there was some relation.
Right,
with that,
only
but
because it
obviously-
was on an older list.
Okay.
But we wouldn't move it forward.
Okay, so it's not part of it.
It's a relatively new development on that parcel.
Well, it also looked like some of the property, their property, in the process cleared on this land that
It's also very large.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like this house is partially encroaching on this
Right, that
property.
would be evaluated by real estate, and those issues would be resolved before we close.
Yeah.
And also just take into consideration that these maps can be off a little bit here and there, and it's an estimation of the property line, but the survey is done before we close, and those issues are resolved before.
Jim, it's like tax maps, they're never fully accurate in terms of dimension.
Yeah, because a part of that was one of the aspects of my question about that house or the structure was the waste system and all that sort of stuff, and how close to the property, it is located to the purchaser. Yeah. I mean,
They stuck it in the marsh. I don't know, realistically, they can't.
Yeah,
I mean, they'll
evaluate.
ultimately, right, it would, we were trying to avoid any further development in this area because of the flow nature and the wetlands immediately adjacent to that property, but, we try our best to,
Of course.
buy whatever we can, and development occurs, don't want to reduce our interest in acquiring whatever is left.
Of course. I guess what I'm looking to qualify is that the waste system is not encroaching upon the actual purchased property or the acquisition.
I would imagine
Yeah.
not. This is a relatively new development, and it's not like it's 50 years old where that may be a more obvious situation. But I would imagine that surveys were done, and those things were
Generally,
checked.
that's what happens. You have to submit so much documentation to get a septic system approved. You just don't encroach. It just doesn't happen.
Okay, any other questions?
Tom?
Is there an opportunity to use any of those parcels to create some of that runoff into a swale? It's great to have the property if it needs to be protected. Now that it comes into our possession, is there a way that, that's a street end there.
Right.
I can't see the topography, but if the runoff's heading that way, it'd be nice to.
We'd have to evaluate that and see what kind of runoff is going on there, if it's significant, and how we would be able to handle that. We might be able to do that. But at this point, we're not looking to do that here.
Motion unlisted neg deck.
Okay, any other concerns? Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Eva, all in favor? Motion passed. Thank you very much.
Before she leaves,
Yes.
Loretta,
Yeah.
this past summer, we ran a couple of workshops with the Corps of Engineers at the university, and it was to review their Fire Island to Montauk plan post-Sandy and sort of get a community feel about it. One of the suggestions was that they really should emphasize purchasing of property, wetlands and things, and property that's endangered. And I think they would be more than willing to work with you to share costs if opportunities come up. For example, I know we've always run into the issue of if we get a property and it has a house on it, we're concerned, or what is the obligation of having the house? I think the Corps, if you bought the property, for example, the Corps might be willing to take down the house and renovate it.
We've seen some, we've been evaluating a number of grants coming out of the Hurricane Sandy, and a number of those grants actually have indicated that they would be willing to pay the cost of demolition on structures that were damaged in the hurricane. So, you know, we would like to reach out, and if, you know, Larry, if you'd like me to, you know, work on that with you to try to structure something, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, I can give you contacts.
Okay.
I'm not in the position to structure.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta.
You're welcome.
All right, recommended unlisted action. B, proposed rehabilitation of drainage system for stormwater remediation, North Fork Preserve, Northville, Town of Riverhead.
Excuse me, Gloria, did you vote on the...
Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
Oh, you did?
And it passed.
Pay attention.
Sorry.
You're on a roll today, Larry.
Be careful, more coffee.
With coffee.
Is that your excuse? Cranky.
Rash. He's always cranky.
Thanks, Andy.
All right,
everyone.
good morning. Please state your name and your affiliation.
My name is Chris Polter. I'm from Suffolk County DPW, Department of Public Works. I'm a junior civil engineer, and I'm here to present today rehabilitation of a drainage system for stormwater water remediation at the North Fork Preserve in Northville, Town of Riverhead. So the North Fork Preserve is a 306-acre parcel recently purchased by Suffolk County Parks, and also Town of Riverhead has a small share, and Suffolk County DPW also has a small share in the parcel. The northern portion is approximately 171 acres of parkland located downstream from the Harbor Hill Moraine. This portion of parkland historically flows northwards towards the beach of the Long Island Sound by way of overland flow and through some natural ditches and some man-made ditches made by the previous owner. During large storm events, approximately 100-year storms, there's a large flow of water that makes its way down through these natural swales, and because the water, there's a large layer of silt, prevents a lot of infiltration. So, you know, basically we have a massive flow that is, you know, eroding the properties of homes along the coast, and also, you know, damaging, you know, flooding out basements. There was piping systems put in to help alleviate this flooding issue by the Town of Riverhead, I believe, put in a couple of those, but we have no records indicate. And these systems basically weren't designed properly, and which caused the flooding to all the homes. So additionally, several of these systems are currently failing, which only exacerbates the problem. Also, no attempt was made to control these erosive velocities of the water going down. So the Suffolk County Department of Public Works proposes to mitigate the impact of flooding to the coastal community by redirecting the stormwater flow from the roadway, which is approximately 3.4 acres of impervious area, to a series of leaching basins, therefore eliminating this input to the erosive and damaging flows. Preventing stormwater from flowing over the roadway, causing significant erosions to adjacent properties. This is accomplished by collecting the runoff at the low points and safely conveying in a properly designed piping system and culvert that contains erosive prevention measures. The following positive impacts are expected from performing the work described above. Reducing or eliminating flooding to basements in low-lying areas that at one point destroyed a home in 2010. Preventing erosion to driveways and the only local emergency access to the beach. And also reducing or eliminating undermining of the bulkhead that contains from the uncontained stormwater runoff. Another 2 points is preventing cesspools from overflowing and combining with stormwater runoff due to saturation of the surrounding soil. And the last point is eliminating flash flooding, which is a significant danger to the health, safety, and welfare of the public. We sat down with DEC and we discussed our project because we're going to need to obtain a permit with them. And we're either in discussions of putting 2 pipes down to the beach or a single pipe, but mostly we're in favor of a single pipe with DEC. We're also coordinating with the Civic Association in the area and the residents and the environmental group in the area. And we're just trying to come up with the best solution to alleviate this problem. So basically, in summary, Suffolk County DPW feels that an improved piping system down to the beach, a larger one to handle the large storm event, and increasing the infiltration and detention of stormwater runoff would have by way of leaching basins, would have a significant positive impact by preventing damage to the coastal community and remediating the discharge to the Long Island Sound by trying to contain most of the water before it gets there. Protecting private property and the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And basically, thank you so much for your time and consideration with regards to this project.
All right, Chris, has the DEC approved this plan that's in front of us today, or are you still working with them?
We're still working with them. They feel that our proposal is good. They're happy with it for the area, and we're basically still in talks. We haven't achieved the final permit.
All right, and this clay layer you were talking about, that is strictly on the preserved part of the property, south of that road?
Well, we did test holes.
Yes, I'm curious.
In the Parkland property, south of Sound Shore Avenue. We haven't done any on the properties of the house, the residents' homes. But yeah, basically the Parkland property is where most of that water is being held. That would be infiltrated, and you see they get a lot of these hot and kettle. The property's holding a lot of water, and so now you come a large storm event, and it's just not much of it's going to the ground. It's pretty much all creating like rivers.
Sheet.
Yeah, exactly.
What about as far as where you want to put your new retention dry wells, if I'll call it that? Has any soil boring been done there to see what the soil is like as far as accepting that runoff?
We're still narrowing down the locations of all leaching basins and stuff. But yeah, we would possibly do some in those areas to ensure that we would be getting through that clay layer.
Yeah, that's what my concern was.
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Chris.
Please take your name. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Gil Anderson, Commissioner of Public Works.
Never heard of you.
Hi, we have the soil borings that we've done on site have indicated that once you get below a certain depth, you are in good material. So we would do soil borings in the locations of those leaching pools.
Okay.
Just to add on to what Chris said, The piping systems that are in there were, to the best of our knowledge, installed primarily through the WPA back in the 30s. So they're small, 8-inch diameter pipes. It's not a direct flow. There is, it breaks up every so often to do some type of recharge onto the site, but for the most part it's I think intended to slow the flow down. In large storms, as Chris mentioned, these systems do not have the capacity to handle large volumes of water. So it overland flows. It has impacted a number of houses, one severely damaging it. The only thing I really wanted to make a point of is these existing systems will likely be abandoned where we're not, again, we're going from 3 sites here down to hopefully 1. I think our preferred alternative is one outfall. So we're minimizing the number of outfalls going directly in there. We will have size piping size for the capacity needed to handle large volumes of water. We intend to meet with the community. We've been meeting with the community regularly to basically get their feedback on this because it is a significant impact to them. And again, by reducing the number of outfalls, we feel it would be benefit to the local area, especially to the sound. And we will, with the leaching pools, treat any road runoff, heavy metals, things like that. And it'll be a separate system from the piping system, which basically will recharge or basically flow the water out into the sound. So the site right now has been heavily worked, from what I understand, of the local community. They've advised me that at one point it was a farm. It's not all the natural features that you would expect. So it has been worked. At one point it was apparently a coastal watch site as well. So there's a lot of work going on there right now. But because it was required by the county, we can't do anything really on site, except where we have purchased. DPW owns land for the recharge basin.
Okay, Jim.
This is a town road?
Yes, it is.
So basically we're saying the runoff is coming off of the county property at this point in time, for the most of the part.
Yes.
Is the town of Riverhead going to contribute anything to it? We're hoping.
Have they been involved in your discussions with the community?
I've had discussions with the local superintendent. At this point, DPW, I feel that primarily most of the cost is going to be borne by the county. The leaching pools that we're going to put in there are generally a minimal cost compared to the piping and everything else that's going to go in there. Knowing the situation that Riverhead's faced with, I would look for some in-kind support, whether that's help doing the installation of leaching pools. We haven't got that far. At this point, it's really just a preliminary plan that we're bringing before you.
Okay. Tom?
Thanks for the presentation. I don't really understand the balance of things entirely, but maybe generally, could you guesstimate of the volume that runs off? When you finish the project, will half of it go down as compared to running off? Because the part that will continue to run off, I think I understand now that it's going to be focused on one release point onto the beach. Is that the case? How much of the runoff will be focused onto that beach front?
Okay. Well, currently there's 3 piping systems, these small 8-inch pipes.
But they're apparently past capacity and
yeah, so
a half-inch event in there.
Exactly. So you're having like 3 sheet flow, 3 rivers of water going down to the beach, and I can't currently give you the numbers as far as the amount of water, but you would be concentrating the 3 into 1 or 2, depends on what DEC proves.
One of the checkoff boxes in the form calls for the coastal erosion hazard area. It says no, but I have to imagine, based on your intro, that this is all about an erosion hazard area. If it were checked yes, what does that do? Well, that's a strange, old planning construct that I don't really know how that would pertain to this, but I'll bet you it does.
That's more cliffs and things like that. A point source like this, they
Yeah,
don't really
coastal
put
erosion
in the
hazard area
CEHA.
pretty much rim the entire coast.
Yeah, but the CEHAs generally are focused upon cliffs and erosion in terms of seawalls and things like that. A point source like that is generally covered under a Speedy's permit or something, or a different type of permit.
Well, Speedy's is for the constituents in the water. I'm more thinking about that release point onto the beach. That's an interesting scenario.
Again, I would go back to, and I apologize for interrupting, this is an existing outfall already. A lot of this water already, if it travels overland, travels to that point, or to, and then to the other points that naturally, there's two locations where everything tends to run down through here and through here, and then there's a natural flow in through here. You know, there is, I would imagine, some level of recharge on site because a lot of these run dry for most of the year until there's a really big storm event. So there is some, we don't know how much, unless Chris does, then please correct me if I'm wrong. There, you know, I don't know how much actually recharges, or at one point it starts to travel overland. We just know that it does, and it does impact the local community. One of the big concerns is the area is that there seems to be some impact from the septic systems, and that by doing this, that's another thing we want to do is to eliminate that, you know, that possible cross connection and flow out to the sound.
Thanks.
And in addition, if I could, Bill Colavito, Director of Highway Design, Suffolk County Public Works. In our discussions with DEC, they preferred the one-pipe solution because there are 3 discharge points now, so that's 3 locations that they worry about erosion on the beach. If we go to the one-pipe concept, it's 1 point that they have to worry about, and that would be what they would prefer. So with regard to the maintenance also of the piping system, we as a department would prefer to maintain 1 pipe.
It's to finish my point then, if you're going from 3 release areas to 1, let's hope that your infiltration volume is about a half, because that would end up leaving that 1 with about what it had before, right? That would be nice.
Well, I would also state that the existing systems do allow for access of overland water directly into it, because what will happen is you'll have a section of pipe that will run under the road, open up into somebody's yard, there's another pipe further downstream. Yeah, it's yeah, so.
Larry?
I guess just to follow up on Tom's, I am surprised actually you don't have an estimate of how much volume you hope to retain. But I gather that you see this pipe that's going out to the beach as being really sort of an emergency relief valve kind of thing.
Yes.
It's not going to be, you know, a half-inch rain probably won't.
Right. And we could put the numbers together. We just are not at that point right now.
Okay.
We're just looking for a layout and approval on basically not only from you but also from the local community. We have to go back to them. We have reached out to them. They, I believe, have the plans. And you know, again, there's a lot of little houses all packed in together, so we want to minimize whatever impact we're going to do that.
Okay, my last question is, what is the use in terms of people going to the beach there? Is this a popular place to swim in the vicinity of your outfall?
This is all private.
Yeah, it's private.
It's all private.
It's all private, yes.
Jim?
What is this discharge on the beach going to look like? I mean, how is that going to be handled? I'm kind of curious. Is this just a pipe coming out there with the water going to come flying out of the beach? Are you going to have some type of erosion control?
Yeah, definitely erosion control measures. We're still in final design, but it would be most likely a head wall, maybe some gabion baskets around it to kind of slow down the flow, and then maybe cover it with some natural stone to try to kind of hide it as much as possible. Something along those lines. So.
What kind of end-of-pipe filter does the DEC require? Is there any filtration required?
Well, we would be putting a series of leaching basins along the run that would help settle out any of the heavy solids that in the flow, and also try to retain as much of the runoff as possible.
But there's no end-of-pipe treatment of the water required, because this is natural parkland. We're just going to put into a pipe. This isn't roadway. We're separating the roadway water from the natural parkland water, which just conveys down to the beach.
Michael?
This is a question about the DEC and that single, if you will, point discharge. and I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. DEC generally likes to try and choke off as many point sources of runoff and things like that as possible. That came from the 208 studies and everything that the county's been trying to do. You've got that imperative in the Long Island Sound program, etc. You're telling us basically at this point in time that you've got a capture system, an interceptor system with basically an overflow, not situation, but an overflow design aspect to it that's going to lead to one pipe. And DEC is okay with this one pipe as long as you put in as much sediment capture and things like that at this point in time. Have you gotten any permits from DEC at this time for that concept of one pipe, or are you in the process?
No, we have not received any permits or anything like that. Before we spent a lot of time on it, we decided to sit down with DEC and said, what do you think about it in the first place? And they had no objections at all, other than let's try and get it to one pipe.
Okay, so basically at the end discharge, as Kara brought up, and one or two other members brought up, the final discharge point, which is always what people have concerns about, you're going to essentially be capturing as much sediment upstream as you can, and at the point, the discharge point itself, you'll have, as you were just saying a moment ago, gabions and things like that.
Yes.
And you anticipate that DEC will give you a permit for this?
Yes, we do. Yes. Yeah, I certainly, being out there several occasions, I've dealt with a lot of the homeowners. It's a beautiful beach, very, very sensitive to a big head wall just sitting on the beach. So the DEC suggested a big head wall. We would probably do a big head wall, but we would like to kind of cover it up.
Camouflage it a little bit.
And kind of maybe put some, there's other natural like granites and stones that are on the beach. Maybe we could put something around it to kind of shield it. But certainly very, very sensitive to that. It's a beautiful beach. I just don't want to sit a concrete head wall.
I have one more question that was whispered to me. Are there any resident geese in the area that might like it? Not my question, though.
Don't know that one. Yeah, that one.
I mean, back in the park, a lot of stuff in the park. But
actually, it was rephrased to me. Are there geese in the area whose droppings might basically pop into the interceptor system?
From going out there, actually, I've never seen any geese on the property. I've seen lots of other various ducks and things like that, but not geese.
Eva?
Some of my questions have already been answered, but I'm just curious about the existing septic systems that are there. Are they older septic systems? Is there a mixture of new and old, and capturing some sort of control over that situation?
Well, I know that there has been some upgrade of the homes in the area. Most of them are most likely older septic systems. The newer systems, I know the Berkowitz property, they redid their house. I would assume they had, because it was expanded, they may have upgraded their, I want to say I'm almost certain they put in a new septic system because they tore the whole property up. So, again, this is one of the things we want to minimize by redoing the whole piping system, is to get away from this cross control that between the existing septic and the existing storm drains.
Right, and because some of the older ones too were just blocks, they were not contained, so dealing with runoff from that. I was curious if how you were going to address that sort of thing.
Well, by minimizing the overland flow would help keep the ground from becoming saturated. Obviously, they're on private property, so there's really nothing we could do with their septic systems.
You can't force an upgrade.
No, well, they're trying to.
And that's one of the problems we've come across. One of the problems we've come across as they've developed this is because we don't have a real. Nobody has a map of where these things are without physically cameraing the piping and seeing where they end up. People will open up their yards and all of a sudden the water blocks up and it blocks into somebody else's property and this whole,
there's a
big
whole
chain.
Dynamic, I'm sure, that goes on with that, yeah.
Right.
Well, I haven't heard anybody, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I've heard anybody speaking about the integration with the MS4 program, but this is certainly right in their strike zone. I'm not familiar with MS4 promoting outfalls or looking forward to more outfalls or even a better outfall. They're going to be all about the treatment, particularly for the fecal load and the nitrogen. You mentioned metals. I'm not sure whatever happens to metals. If they're in the flow, they're going to stay in the flow. But fecal definitely you could help with, and nitrogen if it sits in that rack, that'll get better too. Is the MS4 program considering this too? Are they part of who you're talking to in your?
This drainage system that we're constructing would not fall under the MS4 permits because it's not a roadway stormwater system.
I'm
We're
sure
gonna
it will. I'm
separate
sure
the
it will.
roadway, but we're just taking the parkland water. And when we discussed it with DEC, they were absolutely, you're just passing a stream. That's basically what we're doing. We're not mixing in the roadway water. When you get the roadway water, that's when the MS4 really starts.
I would urge you to check up with the MS4 program at the Riverhead level and then at the county level, because it is going to be included in MS4 eventually. Whatever you're categorizing it now when you're doing the work is one thing, but it is all about MS4.
That's why I asked the question about the DEC permits and things like that.
Well, it's not DEC permitting of the outfall that I'm speaking. I'm talking about the overall flow, and Riverhead's going to get credit for this. This is going to be a good thing. It's very, very positive. My point is, when we're talking about the face and the release onto the beach and what do you stick on the end of the pipe, you can't do much at the end.
Right.
But you can get away with things at the end if you're doing things up in those retained maintenance in those basins.
Yeah,
and the MS4 is they know how to get the most credit for doing the work, and also they can help you not chase the myth of, well, we better, I don't know, other things that vendors say you can do with these pipes. MS4 can help you not pay that expense if they don't think they're going to get credit for it.
Tom, in one respect, they are hitting a lot of the MS4 objectives by having a staged interceptor system like this, and I think it's 48 basins.
My point is just simply to make sure that they're talking to them. I'm not going to tell you what to do or not to do. Just
yeah, but I'm just saying it looks like they're hitting the objectives, except for the point source, which gives me pause. Except for the point source, having a staged interceptor like this with an overflow, you're as close as you can get.
No, that's a fair point. We'll make sure we look into that between our own program as well as dealing with the town. We're going to have to go across the road and whatever we do.
It'll be favorable in the end. Just
take the points, don't give them to Riverhead.
Yeah.
Especially if we're paying.
Yeah, they're not kicking in.
Okay, Larry?
I have a general question. What is the county's policy now on things like vortex and swirl concentrators, and are you using them at all, or are they being abandoned?
No, we do have an active program. When we do have the funding, we are putting in what effectively is a train between, including a swirl separator, a catchment, a swirl separator, and then some treatment of, what do you call those things? I call them
the soakers.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, essentially, the bag system. The socks. We basically add that into it at the end, to treat any type of escaping stuff.
And you have the personnel and all to keep them up.
Yes. Yeah, we have I believe have one or two Vector trucks that we do on a regular basis. Clean them out, maintain them. So.
That we keep track of those so that we know that some need to be cleaned about every 18 months, some need to be cleaned about every 12 months. So we kind of keep track of that, and we're developing a feel for, all right, this location, we got to clean more, this one we can let sit for.
And don't get me wrong, we haven't hit all the outfalls yet. We're still working our way through it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Question. Are you going to be putting in any of those types of catch basins, the vortexes, et cetera? That's not specified in the plan at this point in time.
I don't think we've gotten to that point.
But you're considering it, or?
We would consider it. Again, I really haven't gotten to that point. We're just laying out a, I mean, theoretically, honestly, I don't imagine the park drainage would have one of those, because that might wind up being a maintenance nightmare between the leaves and everything else. But it's something we look at. The road system is going to be basically just leaching pools.
Following up on what you guys were just saying, where are we at the point in time at this?
Yeah,
this
I
project?
wanted to just discuss, Gil, that the fact that it sounds like it's still somewhat conceptual, the design, and perhaps maybe it's a little early to bring it up to CEQ. I really think before we make any decisions and vote on this, that it should be finalized with your design. We really have to sit down with the local community, town of Riverhead, and as Tom mentioned, you really have to touch base with your own Suffolk County MS4 stormwater management plan, And after all of these stakeholders are invited and the design is finalized and approved by the DEC, I think then you should bring this forward to us as a final design, and then we will decide and go forward on it. I think it's still too early.
Good question. Following up on what our chairperson is talking about, this is evidently preliminary. Are you under any deadlines or anything like that at this point in time? No. If we sort of passed on this at this point in time, would that hurt?
The one deadline that we are under is originally we were going to construct a recharge basin so that there was money appropriated this year to do that recharge basin. That's out of the question now. So when the piping system came in, I decided let me get this to CEQ so we can appropriate the money this year and keep it on the side. And once we work out with the towns, with the homeowners, what we're going to do with the piping systems, and I already have money in the bank, I could go for it. I can go knock out this project instead of waiting for another year or so. Okay. Only because if you were out there on some of these storms, it's a very, very bad public safety issue. So that's why I kind of raised it to the surface, jumped the gun. I did come here a little early. I wish I could say which one I'm going to do, but we're still working with the homeowners on that. But I felt very, very comfortable. Once I knew DEC was on board, I felt very, very comfortable coming to the council.
Mike.
Can I make a suggestion? I know how the board generally thinks about these things. I fully agree with you that this is maybe too early to give a positive vote. We just don't have everything. But if they're looking for, a vote of confidence, or not permission to go ahead because we don't do that, but sort of a conceptual approval, a general sense, or something like that.
Well, my thoughts were that if we did anything today with this conceptual design plan, it certainly has merit for what you're trying to accomplish. But I think what we should do is basically vote on that the conceptual design is fine to keep going forward if it gives you the opportunity to get those funds you were talking about, to then appropriate the funds, but then it must come back before the board when you have your final design.
Sure.
Okay?
I make that motion.
Go ahead, Tom.
I think the last comment that you made kind of turned the light bulb on for me. It is about drainage, and when you do drainage, there are these little, 1-inch flows and percentage storms and all that kind of stuff, and we want to tweak it and make it perfect. But in fact, a lot of this is public safety related, and it mostly pertains to those crazy events, which are happening more frequently now, and during which all those design things are out the window anyway. So I guess I'm asking our CEQ what we can do or should do to advise you on juggling those two things, because in fact you need to do a public safety, houses are sliding down the hill measures first and foremost. And by the way, there'll be some of these tweaking runoff infiltration things too. So what do we do with that? I agree with you, and I guess I'm trying to build on your notion of moving forward, particularly with the public safety part, and then we can re-review the gentler, more subtle coefficients of infiltration and such. But I wouldn't want to try to perfect that when in fact this is about these freight trains that come flying by.
I mean, the only thing I would say to that, within any drainage design, in whatever standards you're holding to, you do have to make a certain capacity for some overland travel, irrespective of what MS4 says, everything else. There's always going to be some storm that comes along that's going to just be more. Hopefully at that point it's far enough into the storm that it's not going to be a significant impact to overland flow, but you always have to consider that. The area, essentially, if that did occur, we would design it for a certain size storm. Another storm comes in that's larger, there is going to be that overland flow. It's going to follow the path that it's always taken overland down there. Our intent is, we want to have it happen once every 100 years rather than once every,
once every 3 months.
Right, yeah.
So I guess I would second your notion, Chair.
Otherwise we segment it. It's just not good. And frankly, I don't think under the rules we're allowed to do something like that.
So is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to, well, this would be unlisted, obviously, but we're not going that far. This is we would be giving them a sense of, I don't even know how to phrase raise this at this point in time, that we'd like to see further design work before we give a secret
I would like
approval.
to, I can't make a motion as chair, but I would like to say that the motion should say that we are agreeing with the conceptual design.
Okay.
And
I
that
like
when
those
the
words.
design is finalized, it must come back to the CEQ for review.
Yeah, to add to that, I think the environmentals that are submitted, are good. I don't think they have to be redone once you do your redesign map. I would like to see a topography superimposed on this design map to know where the swales are and where these, conduits are being formed.
I'd also like to see, excuse me, Jim, the area of where this clay lens is, how much it covers of the parkland. I'd like to really get a feel for the topography out there besides the elevations, but also that clay lens and how large it
And
is.
also some of the discharges that we're looking for. What kind of volumes of water are we dealing with? I mean, your pipe has to take that into consideration.
It certainly does, and we'll have, if we're forced into two pipes, well, that'll be two different flows. So depending upon what piping system we come up with, then I'll be able to define the amount of flow that we're going to have in it, because I have kind of three separate areas. So if I'm doing two piping systems, it'll be a certain amount of flow. If I get to one piping system, it's going to be significantly more. So once I finalize that design, we'll be able to speak far more intelligently and give you specifics. With respect to the lenses of clay, this is your typical North Shore moraine area. It's the whole area, from the beach, from the bluffs, all the way probably to 25A, is probably covered in various lenses of clays and silts, and that's what we have found. It's not just one that goes across, it's perched areas and perched waters throughout that whole area. So if I were to give you a map, I'd probably shade the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, just give us some tests
The-
on that.
Eva?
Yeah, we'll give you the
What I'm
test on
curious
that.
about, because I don't know that area
I
that
don't
well,
either, that's
is
what
the
I'm asking.
thickness of those lenses, are they?
We can provide,
You know,
that when we
that's
come
fine.
out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
You're going to be doing it anyway, so.
Yes.
yeah.
No.
Okay, so do we
That's my
have a motion?
That's my motion, I'm sticking to it.
Was that clear enough for that motion that Mike said?
I have a question.
She said it really well.
On the letter, I agree with what we're saying, that a letter should go back. The motion is that a letter goes back to DEC. We support the concepts, and we'd like to see the further final design plans and further revisions, and that another map be submitted for the revised plan with a topography thing and some water volumes and everything else. I don't want you to redo all this again.
No, that can all stay.
That can all
Define
stay.
this.
Right.
And that, when it gets finalized, the council will then entertain it, with respect to finalization.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second? Eva seconded, all in favor? Motion passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you
and
very much.
Thanks, guys. Nick, are these bluffs over there at the sound side, or is it typical bluff, say 50 feet high, something like that?
But there's no parkland on that side of the road.
But I'm talking about where the house is.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
These bluffs. I can see something like that on this aerial, but I can't tell.
Might be calling your bluff.
Excuse me?
Are we calling your bluff?
I'm calling it bluff.
There's no retaining walls, Nick, is there?
Some do.
Some of them have, okay.
All right, recommendations for LAD's report, recommendations for legislative resolutions laid on the table July 30th, 2013, I'm sorry. John, you have anything you want to bring up in particular? There's quite a few on here.
Yeah, a lot there. The staff's recommendations for the secret classifications are on the left-hand side of the resolutions. There was one resolution that was listed as a type 2 action that in reviewing it, it appeared to staff after discussions that it was it could be considered a type 1 action. So I just wanted to give just a little information on that. That's
Which number?
That's introductory resolution 1692. And it's establishing guidelines for the use of methamphetamine in Suffolk County. So the secret clause for this resolution was a type 2. As you see, our recommendation there is that it's a type 1 action and to submit a supplemental EIS to CEQ. This resolution, just real briefly, limits the use of methamphetamine, except in very specific instances. And in 2007, the county did a vector control plan, And in reviewing this, it appears that that's a significant change to the 2007 vector control plan that may have a significant impact. So just based on the secret law, that 1617.10D4, it's our recommendation that it's a type 1 action and that a supplemental EIS is required.
Thank you. Any discussion?
If I may, as one of the people who oversaw the development of the plan, if you're looking at 1617.10, aside from the D4, which I'll get into in a second, there's also another section that kicks in, and that's section C. So I'll go through both sections for to tell the council what's going on. Okay, D4 says a supplement to the final generic EIS, and remember vector was a generic EIS, must be prepared if the subsequent proposed action was not addressed or was not adequately addressed in the generic EIS, and the subsequent action may have one or more significant adverse environmental impacts. John has stated that the reading of the plan and basically may have those kinds of large impacts. Also in the plan, it was not addressed what would happen if there was a loss of the primary larvicide or lessening of the larvicide program. So right there you've got a generic EIS kicking, a supplemental kicking in. There's also another issue under 61710C. Generic EISs and their findings should set forth specific conditions or criteria under which future actions will be taken or approved, including requirements for any subsequent secret compliance. This includes thresholds and criteria for supplemental EISs to reflect specific significant impacts, such as site-specific impacts that were not adequately addressed or analyzed in the generic EIS. Now, inside the EIS, in at least 3 places that I can remember, one in the finding statement and 2 in other places, okay, there were criteria placed in specifically stating that supplemental EISs were required to be prepared if the plan was changed in any substantive way. Any changes in the specific changes in the chemical use, how it was used, things like that require SUP. Okay, reducing larvicide effectiveness, if people see it that way, is a possible impact upon the environment. The use is a big change. Regardless of whether you see it as a good thing or a bad thing, it is a big change in the plan as it exists right now. It is significantly alteration. It is a significant alteration of the plan. So again, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, that's not the standard. Okay? Legislator Schneiderman obviously believes it's a good thing, as set forth in his bill, to, if you will, change the usage patterns of methoprene. The problem is there can be, and this was specifically identified in the EIS, there can be impacts. As such, 2 places in the generic EIS rules and requirements, which is the only thing that we have to go by, 2 different places, each time we're kicked into a supplemental EIS, regardless of whether we think it's a good thing or a bad thing. Significant change is what's going on the way the bill is drafted. So that's just under the GEIS. The real rule, as people like to say it in shorthand, is you have an EIS, if you have a generic EIS or any regular EIS, you can't change it by legislative fiat. It has to be changed by a supplemental. That's the rule. Okay?
Tom?
I was not aware of the details of how that generic EIS was put together or the vector control plan, but I had become more aware in recent years of the annual review and revisiting and rethinking of how's it going. And there is an adaptive approach, or there's an allowance for here's what we learned and here's what's emerged in the science. So I guess I was wondering if we could hear from the program itself on what this thought process, how this thought process might be able to be accommodated during the annual review, as contrasted with firing off a whole supplemental.
Well,
is that something which we could suggest as part of the conversation of considering this?
Well, I'll say this much. I've been involved, I'm vice chairman of the Pesticide Management Committee, and they're the ones who generally prepare the triennial reports and also oversee the preparation of the yearly reports. Okay, and in an overarching way, I'm just going to set the stage, if you will, for however you want to have the question set up. In an overarching way, the program, not the programs, the yearly work programs and also the triennial have not varied in any significant way from the EIS. They in fact have followed the EIS. The real changes that have occurred are, well, maybe they're operational in nature. Don't larvicide so much here, or we're not going to ditch so much over there, or we're going to try and reduce the adulticide, and that's all provided for in the plan, in the main EIS. Plus, it's also provided for in the annual reports. There's no real changes, if you will, on that. But again,
so that was the essence of my question, which I couldn't form well. Is there provision in the existing plan to allow for adjustments or rethinking to this nature?
Major adjustments, significant adjustments require a sub. Minor operational decisions are left to the superintendent of vector control, who's here right now. But generally, he follows those the rules that were set up in the EIS itself. Now I'll give you a perfect example. There's a new threat out there, the Asian tiger mosquito, or the ATM as we call it. Unfortunately, you don't get any money when you go try and talk to them. There's the chemical makeup that we have right now, or the chemicals that are in the arsenal right now, are apparently not very effective against the ATM. To introduce a new chemical into the program will require a supplemental EIS. The Pesticide Management Committee determined that, I don't know, 6 months ago. I think it's Duet, if I'm not mistaken. What's the one for the ATM? I don't remember the name.
Duet.
Duet, okay. Duet. It's registered in New York State. It's registered with the with EPA. It's available, but it has not. We can't use it yet until we do a supplemental, because that's a change to the master EIS. New chemical, got to do it, and we've not done it yet. There's still a paucity of information, and the threat has not yet risen, except in isolated areas, to the level where an emergency response has to be done. So basically the concept is new chemical,
your point.
EIS.
See if I can move back, or move it along, or back to what I was trying to focus on. As I read the resolution regarding methoprene use, I could imagine an interpretation that says this is actually an operational topic, because in fact methoprene is already spoken to, and this text, although I would suggest some changes to it, really just alters who's notified, when, and so it doesn't. I haven't yet heard the part that totally kicks in a supplemental, because the newness here is part of what I would call the guidance on the use.
I'd like to comment on this too as a sponsor.
State your name, please.
Legislator Jay Schneider. Thank you for giving me a moment, and thank you for all who serve on CEQ for your service. So, yeah, methoprene is a larvicide. It goes by the brand name Alticid. It is one of the 3 larvicides that, when we approved the vector control plan, we approved for the vector control division to use. The other 2, BTI and another similar name compound, are bacterial. And methoprene is not. It's not a naturally occurring substance. It's a chemical. It mimics the hormones of arthropods and prevents them from maturing. Whether you believe it's related to the lobster die-off, and I have to say since 1995, since we first started using methoprene in estuaries, we've seen a 96% die-off in the lobster population. It's almost completely gone. And you could say it has, there'll be those who say it has only to do with temperature. What this bill is contemplating is that we have other tools in the toolbox. We have BTI, that there is really no showing that there's non-target organisms that are affected. Whereas methoprene, on the labeling, says it's acutely toxic to marine invertebrates. You have, now they'll say in the concentrations that are used, it's not toxic to non-target marine invertebrates. Either way, we have choices. So what this bill does is it provides some guidance only in estuaries, in salt marshes, where the likelihood of West Nile is very low. Those typically are freshwater mosquitoes. Dominic will say that there's still a chance, and I don't disagree with it. What this does is says, use BTI first. Use that as your first choice. If it's not effective, go to methylprednisolone. Or if you believe that there's a threat of West Nile or encephalitis or any other, go right to methylprednisolone if you think that's the best choice. Or waive all of it through if the commissioner of the health department feels that there's a health emergency and you want to jump right to methylprednisolone use. Now, Connecticut, the state of Connecticut has restricted methylprednisolone use. Rhode Island has restricted methylprednisolone use. Maine has restricted methylprednisolone use. So you can say they're all crazy, they're all wrong, it's all politics, none of it's based on science.
When you say restricted, what's the nature of the
Maine is banned. Well, you can correct me, Dominic, you'll have a chance in a moment. They've had a ban on methylprednisolone for quite a number of years. Connecticut has recently placed restrictions on its use. And it doesn't completely eliminate it. They have a similar provision by which, if there's a threat of West Nile virus or other insect-borne illnesses, they can use the methylprednisolone. The DEC, because we need freshwater and saltwater permits to apply these chemicals, the DEC has provided their own guidance. And they are telling the department, don't use methylprednisolone as the first resort, or minimize the use of methylprednisolone. And I actually agree with what you said, Tom. The way I looked at this is that this does not contemplate a new chemical. It doesn't tell them to do anything that they can't already do under the approved vector control plan. It's just basically a kind of a cautionary approach to the use of methylprednisolone in light of studies which they will dismiss as being non-scientific, which shows methylprednisolone in lobsters in the middle of the Long Island Sound, which when we approved the plan, we were told there's just no way that would happen, yet they're finding lobsters with methylprednisolone. So there's some new science. It doesn't say you can't use methylprednisolone, and believe me, I'm concerned about West Nile, I'm concerned about Lyme's disease, and a host of other public health concerns. We have a very powerful tool in BTI with no connection to non-target organisms. That should be used first. Now, I'm going to ask this body, and you can debate this issue. I have a meeting following this with Mr. Ninavaji and with Mr. Anderson. I'm willing to look at the other changes to the bill. I'm also willing to look at possibly talking about it in connection with next year's vector control plan, because basically this season is over now. So I'm going to ask you actually not to vote, to not take a position on it and table it, so that I can tweak the bill if needed to, if need be, based on those meetings. And then you may be voting on a very different bill.
Yeah. Thanks for the chance to reflect on it further and maybe clarify it for the discussion in the future. 3 parts of the text that we've been given to consider, even if we're not going to vote on it, I would offer in the 5th whereas the verb you use is that the guidelines are to limit the use of methylprednisolone. I would suggest that the guidelines are to guide the use of methylprednisolone. In the first resolve, I would suggest you consider clarifying it, because you've said, or it is written that the threat has been positively identified. It would be helpful to understand the time frame that positive identification pertains to. Because if you identify it this year, does that not apply to next year, or is it week? Is it a day, week, month? So the time frame there would help to know what the trigger is that you're trying to apply. And then in the third resolve, talking about notification of the particularity of the location of the application, it seems it would be incomplete without also including some notion to the amount that was applied.
Okay.
So those are 3.
Well, what I want to look to is at the DEC permits and see exactly what the DEC guidance on the use of methylprednisolone is, and possibly come closer to mimicking what the DEC is already requiring the county.
Thank you.
If I may.
Just state your name, Gil.
Oh, sure. Gil Anderson, Commissioner of Public Works. There's a couple of things, and we did go through this in '07. I mean, it was long and drawn out, and the thought of doing this again is churning my stomach. But be that as it may, I want to make a comment with regard to this not being. I don't consider this operational because it's being legislated. This is not an internal decision within the department. that based on our actual operation and our findings from that actual operations, decides us to get away from this. We talked about methoprene as a tool, and I'm going to go back to the real reason we do all this is to protect public health. I'm not a public health physician or whatever the right term is. I'm an engineer. I fully acknowledge that. But one of the statements the legislator made was that the methoprene contributed to the die-off of lobsters in the Great South Bay. Now,
Long Island Sound.
I'm sorry, yeah, definitely in the Great South Bay. In the Long Island Sound. We started using methoprene in '95. The lobster drop-off happened long before this.
No, it's not true.
The timing, the thing this restricts is our ability to address quickly the life cycle of a mosquito, to minimize the ability of the mosquitoes to get out there and get disease out there into the public. We talked about this, the ability, the restricting methoprene to certain restrictions, 2 times, this times. We've been through this, and I, with all due respect to the legislator, I would strongly argue against this, and I will argue against this bill, because of concerns for public health. Mosquitoes grow so quickly that this type of thing, you could already have disease airborne and out there to the public before you start to initiate the methoprene. And certainly the superintendent can speak more clearly on this than I can.
Thank you, Bill. Legislator Hahn.
So, I guess I want to get at the point about, what would happen if, and this might require Dominic, if BTI is not effective, and if we can talk about the life cycle, if you don't think it will be as effective to treat, whether it's the ATM or others that carry the West Nile virus, what will be the end result? Will we need to use more adulticide? And then is that what we haven't studied? Is that why,
Well, we've already done the experiment, as it were. There was a period of time when the program was limited to only using BTI, the bacterial in the salt marsh. And we had huge numbers of salt marsh mosquitoes reaching the residential areas, because what we found is that it's not effective under all circumstances in the salt marsh. In 1995, we did our initial work bringing methoprene into the program. We went full scale in 1996. And what we found very quickly is that the numbers of salt marsh mosquitoes reaching the residential areas dropped by a factor of 5 to 10. This is a difference that people noticed. I can remember it vividly, because I can remember people in Islip near the sea preserve calling me and saying, I don't know what you did, but now I can use my yard. So the reduction in salt marsh mosquitoes was dramatic and sustained. We were able then to reduce the amount of adulticiding we did controlling the flying mosquitoes in the residential areas. That's good mosquito control. That's good pesticide risk management, because in terms of even though the materials we use to control mosquitoes in residential areas have a good safety record, clearly you want to avoid exposing people in residential areas to pesticides if you don't need to. And in addition, the adulticides are a relatively broad-spectrum pesticide, and even though we do apply them in a way that minimizes the impacts on non-target insects, non-target insects are certainly affected, and this is discussed in the long-term plan. And this issue of how methoprene, on balance, is protective of human health and reduces the risks of pesticides has been thoroughly reviewed and thoroughly studied in the long-term plan. In addition, there was a whole section on the long-term plan devoted to the issue of the alleged relationship between pesticides and lobsters. It's important to understand the overwhelming majority of the alticid or methoprene that we use in Suffolk County is on the South Shore. In the wetlands around Great South Bay, and to a lesser extent, Mauritius and Shinnecock, some in Peconic. This is nowhere near Long Island Sound where the lobster mortality occurred. It's just the idea that there was some connection between our use of methoprene and the lobsters is simply not supported by any scientific evidence whatsoever. If you look at the crab fishery landings during the time period that we've been using methoprene, you find actually a couple of years after we started using methoprene, the crab catch actually went up for a while. Now, I'm not going to claim that methoprene is some kind of crab vitamin, but again, this is not what you see. And if you look at it on a sustained basis, crab landings go up and down, but they're about the same as they were before we started using methoprene. So again, if methoprene is terribly toxic to crustaceans, then why wouldn't you see that in the crabs? You have to go with the toxicology. You have to go with the overall balance of scientific information. Methoprene has been around since the 1970s, and it's been very thoroughly studied. This allegation that methoprene was found in lobsters in Long Island Sound was an extremely small sample size in a very difficult analytical technique. It has never been confirmed. This information will never be published in a scientific journal because it doesn't meet scientific standards. Another thing you have to understand about methoprene, I checked with the manufacturer. Mosquito control accounts for about 10% of the methoprene used in pest control and agricultural products. The other 90% is in things like feed-through products, flea and tick. You use it particularly for flea and tick control around your dog. Even if somehow methoprene did get into the lobsters, which I do not think will ever be verified, there is no way of knowing where that methoprene came from, and if it even came from mosquito control. We hear a lot about, oh, the lobsters are thriving in Maine. Well, the center of distribution for lobsters is north of here. You find the American lobster thrives in the Gulf of Maine up to Nova Scotia. It's a cold water animal. When the Long Island Sound lobster mortality was studied, Dr. Alistair Dove, who said it most clearly, climate killed the lobsters. Lobsters in Long Island Sound are near the southern limit of their geographic range. Water temperatures there are barely tolerable for lobsters. It was clearly shown that there was an increase in water temperature in the lobster habitat that basically caused a thermal shock, and that is more than sufficient to account for the lobster mortality. In Rhode Island, they looked at this also. The Rhode Island environmental programs did a study on this, and they found that the lobster recruitment, changes in lobster recruitment could easily be explained by oceanographic factors and an oil spill that had an adverse impact, and there was no relationship to methoprene. So this is the science. We also continue to monitor our program. We have USGS going out and sampling, and we continue to find what we found during the EIS, that methoprene does not accumulate, the levels are very low. So I think that when you're running a mosquito control program or any public health program, you should base it on the science. And the science was looked at the cost of about $4.5 million very thoroughly. We continue to review the literature, and the science continues to support the idea that methoprene has no significant impact on lobsters and is an overall positive for the program.
Gloria? Two things in the bill concern me, and Karen brought it up. The first resolve clause, basically it talks about one or more disease threats and two or more bacterial larvicide treatments. Given the fact, well, first question, methoprene has to be applied early in the breeding cycle?
Oh yeah, I didn't want to get, if you want to get into the I didn't want to get so much into the how bad this bill is in terms of impacting our operation, because I know we're supposed to be talking about secret here. But yes, that's a big problem in terms of you detect disease in adult mosquitoes. So they have to go through their larval development, go out and bite a bird, pick up the virus. Obviously, they're adults, it's too late to use larvicides. The purpose of larvicides in the program are to suppress mosquito numbers, to limit the number of mosquitoes available to cycle virus and to pick up virus and transmit it to people. It's a preemptive approach. By the time you find virus, it's too late to apply larvicides, although we continue to do so, especially if it's early in the season, but you've missed your opportunity to be preventative. So this criteria that we have to have a health threat to apply methoprene, basically, once we find infected mosquitoes, we've missed the opportunity.
All right, so
that's
you're identifying that as a significant change in operation.
But the other aspect doesn't require them to have found the detection of what's not.
Yeah, but
it says they've tried BTI first. It hasn't worked.
There's another problem. There's another problem with that, and we went over this when DEC attempted to put these kinds of provisions in our permits. Let's say you've got larvae out in the salt marsh. Say, okay, we have to try BTI first. We send our helicopter out there. He goes and he applies his BTI. We go the next day, larvae are still out there. Now we got to go another day, and maybe we can get the methoprene out there. By the time that happens, by the time you figure out, first of all, you do a survey. You find larvae. By the time you figure out that your BTI didn't work, and you can get the helicopter out there a second time, the larvae are gone. They've developed, they've emerged, they're biting people. So it's completely impractical to say, oh, we're going to try BTI first, and if it doesn't work, then we're going to go out with methoprene. So not even considering the operational cost of flying a helicopter over the marshes twice.
Then the secret question is, if 2 or more bacterial treatments fail, basically you can't apply essentially methoprene, it's too late. Is that a significant change in your operations and the approach to mosquito control? It's absolutely a
significant change, and I think that it's really clear here that if this bill is intended to cause a major change in our use of methoprene, which it must be, because why would you go through the trouble of introducing a bill for a minor change? Then logically, it's a major change, it's type 1 by definition. That's just simple logic.
The other question I have for you is DEC and the permits. I'm well aware of what goes on, but could you state for the board's elucidation what the requirements are regarding DEC permits, etc.? Have they ever tried to, do they actually limit the use of methoprene, or do they permit it?
They permit it. We have the same rules for use of methoprene in all areas that we use it. The rules are the same on state lands as they are on county lands as they are on Fish and Wildlife Service lands. That's one of the things that I was trying to understand in this 5th whereas clause, that the DEC supposedly established guidelines on their wetlands, and that they were somehow different from guidelines on other wetlands. They had attempted to impose that kind of restriction, and the county took the DEC to court under Article 78 and won on the grounds that having different rules on DEC lands versus other lands was arbitrary and capricious.
But the DEC in there, what is it, Article 15, Section 15, permits for saltwater marshes, do place restrictions on methoprene in terms of, depending upon the larval stage.
We have mutually agreed to guidelines that are consistent with the long-term plan. And they're also consistent with the idea that methoprene is a good material. It's had a very good impact on the program. We like BTI. BTI is an extremely useful material. BTI has advantages such as low likelihood of developing resistance. It's an immediate kill, so you immediately know whether it works or not. It's been around a long time. It's a great material. We like to use it when we can for our own internal reasons. However, like everything else, it's not a cure-all. It doesn't solve every problem that you run into. That's why products like neoprene exist. That's why our other bacterial, Bacillus sphaericus, is out in the market, because it has its own advantages. You know, this has all been very thoroughly reviewed in the EIS.
One other question.
Hold on. Tom?
Two questions. One, just general reference in the description you provided earlier, Dominic, about marble ecology and lobster ecology in different places. You described a lot of different trains of thought. The one I didn't hear, but I'd like you to send us a reference or citations if you would, is about the fate and transport of methoprene itself. I forget, but I would love to know more about what is known about its application in the marsh. Then what? Is it broken down biologically within a day? Does it linger? You said it didn't accumulate.
Yeah.
If you could just, I don't need to go over it now, but if you could just share that with some citations or point me to it.
That's all in the long-term plan in the EIS.
Dominic, you could just send that to Christine, and Christine, you could send it out to all of us via email.
But the one I would like to hear about now, if we could, a little bit more, is what you just were describing about the effectiveness of BTI and when we might have to redo the experiment on, oh no, it didn't work, get the helicopter again. Now that you've been at this for quite a long time, are there general rules of expertise that you've gained which say, you know, BTI works well in sitting waters, but not circulatory waters, or in times of the year, such that we could say, you know, it just doesn't ever work in the Peconics in the spring, but it does work.
Actually,
because those rules or those lessons, maybe we could talk about how those guidelines just are, and there's no need to re-experiment. We have more than 15 years of having worked it out.
And actually, we do have guidelines to that effect. For instance, in the salt marsh, what we find is that in the early stages after they hatch, larvae are much more susceptible to BTI than they are when they're older. Applications also seem to work better when the marsh is flooded. It also tends to work better when it's relatively cool, because the larvae stay in the younger stages longer. On the other hand, when you find late-stage larvae, when it's very warm, when the marsh is drying down, methoprene tends to work better. Sometimes you find a mixture of different stages of larvae, in which case we use a mix of materials. And that is actually incorporated into our guidelines. And that's consistent with the long-term plan, because the long-term plan, you know, contemplates using materials, you know, the correct way, and in a way that, you know, that is balanced. And it's an important part of the analysis of the larvicide program is the idea of reducing the need for adulticides and reducing the need to run trucks up and down people's streets, you know, with pesticide, reducing the need for putting helicopters over people's houses with pesticides. And I think that that's a very important thing.
Yeah, that's where I would close. And that decades of experience and gaining more knowledge about what works here, when and why and how is just, that's how we should
Larry,
answer this question.
I'd just like to go back to the lobsters. I was an author on 2 of the chapters in the lobster study, and one of the things to keep in mind is that the lobsters were dying prior to the spraying of pesticides.
In New York City, exactly.
Out here, too. So, you know, the myth of pesticides killing lobsters is just that, sort of a myth. And another thing that we did was to help answer some of Tom's stuff. We took the chemistry of what we knew about resmethrin, sumethrin, methoprene, and we took the chemistry and its reaction in seawater into account when we modeled where material would be transported to. Essentially, all stuff was way below the limits that would have any effect on lobsters, but most importantly, with regard maybe to this conversation, is that none of it got to deep water where the adult lobsters actually lived. And so, again, there's just so many lines of evidence that suggest that the methoprene or pesticide stuff impacting the lobsters was a big zero. Probably the biggest contribution to the death of the lobsters was, in fact, that somewhere between mid-August and 1st of September or something, we had a cold front come through the area. It completely stirred the water column up. The bottom temperatures dramatically rose almost in a 24-hour period, about 3 degrees centigrade. And that temperature rise at depth reached and exceeded the lethality of adult lobsters. So, you know, that probably is the single biggest thing. And then you consider the fact that the lobsters were also stressed that particular year because of hypoxia and other things that, you know, it was a real, most likely a unique set of circumstances that led to the death of the lobsters and had nothing to do with pesticide spraying.
Mike?
Without taking a position on the environmental impacts or anything like that, I'm just looking strictly at SECR right now, looking at the rules and regulations, and that's what this board is supposed to deal with. I think it's clear from the information that we've received around the table so far that the changes that legislator Schneiderman is proposing are clearly not routine and they can have significant impacts. Now, he cited in the Type 2 criteria 3 different areas. None of them apply. The changes that he's talking about are not routine. They're not continuing agency management and administration. Would be a major reordering of priorities that could significantly affect the environment. We've heard public health issues raised, etc. So basically, when you have under one of the criteria, when you have a major reordering of priorities that may affect, remember the word may, affect the environment, okay, then it doesn't fit the Type 2 criteria for number 20. Type 2 criteria 21 was talking about planning, and that was cited in the bill. This is not exactly a study, this is operational, so 21 doesn't apply. Again, just reading it off, conducting environmental engineering, economic feasibility, and other studies and preliminary planning, this is not that. Then adoption of regulations, policies, procedures, and local legislative decisions in connection with any action on this list, that's 27. The problem is, you look at the GEIS rules and you look at EIS rules. To make an EIS work, etc., you have to follow what is in the EIS. You can't change an EIS by legislative fiat. You can put in or adopt regulations, policies, etc., that support the action on the list. But to the extent that you are changing what's going on, criteria 27 does not apply, and I looked at the case law on this one. Because essentially, from what we're hearing from the superintendent of vector control and some of the other things that have gone on, essentially the Schneiderman bill changes the application of the EIS and how it works. It doesn't implement it. So it's clearly not a Type 2. I think it gets thrown back into a Type 1 because of the may have environmental significance, and you have the 25% kicker in there, where if for Type 1, if there is even the possibility, if there's even the smell of a major environmental impact, which there could be here, you automatically go into a Type 1. So each time I think we're boxed in.
Well,
I don't think we have much of a choice in this.
I am in agreement, as Gil stated earlier, that the resolution proposed by legislator Schneiderman is not just a simple minor operational change. This is a more extensive change in that toolbox that was approved in 2007 when we went through this. That being said, this cannot be a Type 2. This has to be a Type 1. All right? And it should have supplemental EIS after it. Regardless, that's a moot point because legislator Schneiderman said that he wanted to delete it, remove it, whatever, pull it back, table it. Motion to table.
I'll be amending the bill.
But, yes, but I want you to keep in mind, when you amend the bill, be very careful how you word it, what you state, and I think if what you really want to do is have Vector Control and Dominic's group reassess their toolbox and what they are using, maybe you should first open a dialogue with him about that.
Right, and again, we are having a meeting, and as I work on this bill, I'll work with your council as well to look at that issue, and we may have a difference of opinion whether it meets a certain threshold. Of course, CEQ is here, as the secret entity for the legislature to make recommendations on what is essentially is a state program called secret. The state has concerns, certainly through its DEC, about methaprene. Much has been said, and Larry's done some work here, and others have looked at this issue, and don't believe there's a connection. I can tell you, in 1995, the lobster population in Long Island Sound was something around 4 million pounds of lobster. Today, it's 100,000 pounds of lobster. It's a much reduced.
But Legislator Snyderman,
whether it has to do with methaprene or not, look, there's a lot of chemicals we put into the environment. Methaprene is just one of them. Sometimes we learn down the road. We were told initially it wouldn't end up in groundwater, or it wasn't carcinogenic. Later we find out. And
I understand that.
And then it's too late. All I'm saying with methaprene is we have a very effective alternative to methaprene. So if you're not sure about methaprene, they're sure. Some people here are absolutely sure there's no connection, even though we know methaprene is acutely toxic to marine invertebrates. They'll say the concentrations are below that point. But that is its nature. And arthropods are arthropods, and lobsters are arthropods. They have a larval stage. It is affecting lobsters. Now, in these concentrations, they say it won't. Either way, when the science evolves, sometimes we need to evolve too when you're making a big decision. If it ends up being POS-decked and stretched out, nothing ever happens, or maybe it does. I hope everybody's right. I hope methaprene has no effect on our lobster population, our crab population. All I'm saying is that we have a great alternative in BPI that has no effect on non-target organisms. And that should be our choice, our first choice. And that really should be done, even without this bill, by this department.
Well, it's incorrect that BTI has no effect on non-target organisms. That's kind of a myth. BTI is used for fungus gnats. There are other insects that are certainly affected by BTI, and aquatic insects that may or may not be found in their environment. It is true that it doesn't seem to have any effect on crustaceans. But again, we see the same thing operationally with methaprene. I just think that it's really important in managing a program that has public health and all kinds of consequences and is a highly technical program, to do it on the basis of the best science that we have. And the county continues to look at that. For instance, we have the Pesticide Management Committee, where we continue to reevaluate the literature. We continue to look. USGS continues to follow us around. I send them the information as to where we were going, and I never know when they might show up.
So that's science. That's my background too. I was a chemistry major, and it seems that some science we throw out. They found lobsters in deep water with methaprene, and it wasn't supposed to happen, but a recent study found it. So as you get more information, we need to continue to evaluate and analyze and make science-based decisions.
That is part of the Vector Control
It wasn't just
Management
politics in Connecticut that led to methaprene restrictions.
But it was part of the Vector Control Management Plan. From what we went through, as Gil mentioned, slogged through it for a long, long time and came to a good ending. The whole point is trying to do such an operational change onto the Vector Control Management Plan by, as Mike describes it, legislative fiat. You are violating the SEQA, State Environmental Quality Review Act process. That cannot be violated. That's the purpose of CEQ, to follow that SEQA process properly.
I understand it's your opinion that this would require a POS-deck, right? A type 1.
But I'm trying to say...
You're entitled to that opinion, and I'm going to work with council, and we're going to look at that, and we're going to vet that issue. Whether this is administrative, completely allowed within the current plan.
Go ahead, Jim.
It's not a motion. I mean, clearly, it needs further review.
Yes.
You're stating one case. Dominic's stating another case, all right? So, in essence, it's not a type 2 action. It needs further environmental review and to have people analyze it, discuss it before the change is made. So number one, either you go to an EAF, where in part 3 you explain all this stuff,
Right.
and it is a type 1 action because it changes the generic, and the rules and regs...
No, I think that's a debatable question, whether it changes the generic.
The rules and regs said that amended finding statement must be filed by the lake, which needs environmental backup and review.
Dominic could use this protocol now. He doesn't need me or anyone. He could do it right now and say, we're going to use BTI first. He can do that.
In
Doesn't
fact,
need a
it's already
positive.
happening, and
Yes.
it has been happening
Yes.
for decades.
Exactly. So there is a question, on that issue, Jim, whether this changes the current vector control
Well,
plan.
the question here is both sides of the story should be placed in some type of document for analysis. You just can't make a blanket change by legislature, say this is a type 2 action, and we're changing the program, especially if what DPW is saying, that if we have increased population of mosquitoes and increased disease and it's too late, what's the county's liability then?
Do you want to be in a Nassau situation, what happened 2 years ago?
We end up following a protocol that doesn't work, and then we end up with increased disease. What's the county's liability at that point? I mean, all these things have to be discussed, Jay, in the framework of an environmental review document.
Fair question. Now, of course, Connecticut, the state of Connecticut, enacted similar restrictions. So they
Well,
have the
then
same,
you should state your
they answer
case
the
in
same-
an
That's
EAF.
right.
You should bring it all to bear. You should put it in a document for analysis and let it be discussed.
Okay.
I mean,
Jay?
One more thing, Mike, go ahead.
Essentially, you're trying to, the science apparently is in flux according to what you're saying, okay? You have your viewpoint, some of the people around this table have another viewpoint. You're wanting to try and do this by legislative fiat. One, that's not, you're breaking the EIS, which specifically says you can't do that.
If I were trying to eliminate a chemical or add a chemical, I would agree.
Jay, you're
That's not
still
what this
trying to
does.
do it by legislative fiat, even when the science disagrees, okay? Why not try and do it, as Jim was saying, by an EIS with a full science review, okay? That's the way to do it. Let's bring everything to the table. Take the pause deck, okay, and let's do a review.
Michael, I feel this was already reviewed in the vector control plan and in the EIS.
Then what are we doing here then?
So they have the ability to do this now under that vector control plan. They're just choosing not to do it, though the DES, the DEC is proposing.
Jay,
imposing
essentially you're
something
doing legislative fiat versus seeker. Okay, that's essentially what you're trying to do. You've got a state law out there
No,
that
Michael,
covers the
you're
entire
saying
state.
that this is a type 1 action and needs to supplement the EIS.
And also the
And that's
EIS says it. The EIS says
why don't you
changes.
run it through the pesticide management committee and discuss it with them, because they
Yes.
review everything you've done,
Yes.
instead of having legislation mandating that this is the process that has to take place.
Well, maybe then that's where it should happen.
Um,
I have no problem with meeting with them. But, look, this is an important issue. And there is
No one
new
denies
information. An entire state, right across Long Island Sound, has imposed similar restrictions. And we can say, we'll do nothing. We don't care. We know the science better. We'll just continue
Well,
business
you
as
might be
usual.
right, but you got to state
But I
your
think
case.
that's important information that's worthy of our consideration.
I think it's
Yeah,
also
so you gotta
important to
present it.
understand, in the testimony that was presented to Connecticut, all the agencies, technical agencies, did not support it. The lobstermen claimed that this was needed, and one of the chief proponents is a gentleman named Roger Frey. And he was asked about whether he was concerned about West Nile virus. And what he said to the legislature, and that is on the legislative record, is that he thought West Nile virus was a joke. That's what he said. It's in the record. Now, here in Suffolk County, we don't think West Nile virus is a joke. We don't think any of the mosquito-borne diseases are a joke. And we should obviously protect the environment. We should be very cautious about how we do our mosquito control program. But we have to keep in mind, it is a serious business.
And no one's saying that, Dominic.
No, somebody is saying that.
Okay.
I take West Nile very seriously as well.
Okay, at this time, I'm
As I
ending the
do lung
discussion.
disease. Thank you.
You already said you wanted it tabled.
Look,
It will be, but no,
our
I know.
recommendation stands.
We have, yes. And our recommendations stand. If you want to see changes in the vector control management plan, you talk to their pesticide committee and go talk to them. Show them your information, show them your data. And sit down and have a serious discussion about your concerns. But this was approved, and it is a type 1 what your bill was trying to do, because it was significantly changing their ability to manage what they were doing for their mosquito control and their tools and their toolbox to use. I do not want to see that eviscerated after what we went through to approve the vector control
And
management
again, I have a
plan.
meeting following this with
Okay.
Mr. Nanavati
Okay, so,
and Mr.
members of the
Anderson.
board,
So then if he changes the bill, it'll come back before us, the amended
If it
version
Yeah,
will
the
come.
amended version, yeah.
Amended
So
version
that's
will
what
come
I'm
back
asking.
before us, and
I will
it
be
could
changing
change
the bill.
type.
Yes.
There's no need to vote on it.
Yeah, it is. It's on the
So what do we do here today from our perspective? If we're
from
going to
our
table this, how do we do
perspective,
this?
I think,
It's not officially
You can't
withdrawn.
table it.
So we
Before
have
it's in the
to,
packet, that's your determination.
Type
Your
one.
recommendation.
you
it's a
redact
type
it?
1 cause deck.
Did you redact it from the agenda at the beginning of your statements, or is it still
sounded
there?
like
It's
you
not a-
wanted
He
to.
can't,
can't be
before the
official.
legislature, that has to be
No.
done by him.
I understand. Okay, so.
Consider the bill withdrawn. I'll resubmit the new one.
So if you have
I just
formally
withdrew
saying
the bill.
considering it withdrawn, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, because that's what's in the packet.
Okay, I need a motion.
All right, now, this is a little bit of a complicated motion, so let's follow it closely. We have a LADS report before us that has all the legislative resolutions that have been submitted for our review. I will make a motion to accept staff recommendations on all of them except for 1692, which I will make a motion that it is a type 1 action.
They
They recommend it.
Okay, well,
It's already on there.
all right, so recommend acceptance of staff recommendations.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion passed. Thank you very much, Dominic and Jay.
Yeah, we have to review all that. We have to review it.
But he's withdrawn it anyway, so it's not going to go anywhere. Yeah, but it's going to be withdrawn, but we changed it.
Yeah, but you have to still.
Environmental review.
It's not official.
You get amended resolution?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we come back in a packet.
This in fact wasn't a motion.
All this stuff I'm surprised that we had such a crowd considering the agenda.
Me too.
How are you? Good, how are you?
One of my things too.
Board members, other business, we have a presentation by Larry on
Will that be a test?
She's going on a curve?
sewage treatment plant at Stony Brook University.
Okay,
Larry?
first of all, I want to thank Gil Anderson and Kara Hahn for getting together with me, I don't know, maybe it's 2 months ago now, to talk about this issue. And the issue is what to do with the Stony Brook University sewage treatment plant. And the Stony Brook University sewage treatment plant, which is Sewer District 21, is subject to the TMDL process that is enforced by US EPA. And the treatment plant that we're going to talk about has been tertiary treatment ever since it was constructed, 1989. And in a way, that is unfortunate because of the way the EPA is implementing the TMDL process. And basically, the TMDL process is saying you have to reduce the amount of nitrogen by a certain percentage. And if you were a secondary treatment plant, you know, that was okay. You reduced it by a certain percentage. But if you were a tertiary treatment plant and you were trying to reduce it to the EPA standards, then you might be caught in a bind. And that's what Stony Brook actually has been caught in. I'm going to go through two things here. One is I'm going to talk a little bit about medical waste, as exemplified by iodine 131, which is used for thyroid cancer, and then I'm going to talk about hypoxia. And really, this is nothing more than to try to get this group to be vigilant. Because in the short term, the county and EPA have come to an agreement that nothing's going to happen before 2017. 2017, then this whole topic of what to do with this discharge is going to be revisited, and it depends on how other treatment plants in our little district of Long Island Sound are conforming and able to reach goals, what ultimately will happen to this discharge. So here's the Stony Brook plant, built in '89. It is tertiary, it always has been. It serves currently a population of about 20,000. Keep in mind the university continues to grow. And the average flow today is 1.7 million gallons per day. It's designed for 2.5. Right now they are building an addition to accommodate another 0.15 million gallons per day, and also trying to put in a little more nitrogen control with that new facility. So if you go to the campus and go on the south, go through the north entrance, you'll see construction. That's what it's for.
Larry, quick question. What's the TMDL right now at the tertiary level? Is it like 5 parts, 4 parts?
Oh, I don't
10
remember.
parts?
I don't remember. Sorry. So here's my concern. We're talking about Stony Brook Harbor. We're talking about Smithtown Bay. Smithtown Bay is out here. Stony Brook Harbor is here. And Stony Brook Harbor probably is one of the more pristine harbors, if not the most pristine harbor remaining on the North Shore. So we're really talking about an area that could be impacted quite negatively. So the proposal was that in order to meet the TMDL, and because the treatment plant can't be reduced that much more in terms of nitrogen load, that they were going to have to divert some of the flow to groundwater. And these are the sites that were selected to put the groundwater discharge. And, one is, I think, out by on 347. This is on close to 25A, right across from the county park at the BB&G farm stand. This is P-Lot, I think, on the Stony Brook campus, and this is next to the DEC headquarters on the campus. But all the flow from these proposed locations go towards Stony Brook Harbor or West Meadow Creek. Okay, just to point out, these are what we try to achieve with sewage treatment. Remove solids, decrease the biological oxygen demand, reduce pathogens. Now we're emphasizing reducing of nutrients, and by serendipity we get some reduction in toxicants. And I won't go through this, but this is just the flow of a typical kind of sewage treatment plant. So first thing I'm going to talk about is iodine 131, and our hypothesis in doing this study was that there was significant radioactivity in the sewage and sewage sludge that's generated at this particular sewage treatment plant, that it should be something that we're maybe not concerned about, but we certainly should be aware of.
Is that from the hospital?
This is from the hospital. So all the hospital at the university goes through Sewage District 21. And the important thing, one of the important things here is that radioactive medical treatment is not regulated. So the use of radioisotopes in medicine is regulated by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Patient waste is not regulated. The U.S. EPA regulates the disposal of sewage and sewage sludge. Current regulations do not include radioactivity. So we have 3 kinds of treatment: halotherapy, diagnostic, and brachytherapy. all treatments do not necessarily contribute to radioactivity in sewage. And so teletherapy, patient waste is not radioactive, and the patient is not radioactive. That's when you get zapped. Zap.
Thank you.
Look at Art now.
I needed that.
He looks healthier.
So diagnostic.
Rub it off. I needed that.
Feels good.
This is when the material is injected or ingested. The patient is radioactive, and the patient waste is radioactive. And these are just some of the chemicals that are used in this particular form of treatment.
The GAD, that's the stuff they use in the MRIs? Gadolinium?
Oh, gallium.
Gallium.
Yeah,
Close enough.
I think so. And then brachytherapy. Radiation source is placed inside the body. The patient is radioactive. There are two sources, sealed and unsealed. And sealed sources are essentially seed implants. Waste is not radioactive. And here it's ingested or injected, and the waste is radioactive. And we're going to be talking particularly about this. So iodine-131 has a half-life of only 8 days, but it is probably one of the most commonly used radioactive materials in medicine, and it's used specifically for thyroid and hyperthyroid issues. And it turns out the Stony Brook University Hospital is a regional center for thyroid cancer. So we get a number of patients. Now, the way the sewage treatment plants work in our area is that the sludge is constantly recycled so that you might have a patient on Monday, you might not have another patient for another 2 weeks, but because of the recycling that takes place in the sewage treatment plant, there's always just sort of a low level of iodine-131 in the system. So, discharge of iodine-131 by cancer patients, 55% of the activity is removed in the first 24 hours, and 85% is excreted over the next 5 days. And this is just a little bit about iodine-131, half-life of 8 days, and most commonly used radioisotope in medicine, and again, hyperthyroidism and thyroidism. And these are the samples that where we sampled. We sampled the influent, that is the sewage going untreated into the treatment plant. We sampled the effluent, we sampled the sludge as well. So we found radioactivity from iodine in all these samples. And I should say that this particular work has been published in 3 or 4 articles like health physics and things like that. So this is all published stuff. So this is a sample of what we found in measuring concentrations of iodine-131. There are actually 3 sewage treatment plants involved. The Stony Brook is the blue, Port Jefferson is the yellow, and the red is Oyster Bay. And if this little arrow means there was no detects in the Port Jefferson, the red arrows down here, no detects. We did get a detect in this case. But you can see that the Stony Brook concentrations are considerably higher than other treatment facilities. So, U.S. drinking water standards is 0.1 becquerels per liter. Iodine-131 on the order of 200 becquerels per liter in this effluent. It's not regulated. So iodine-131 concentrations in sewage effluent discharged in sewage District 21 are much greater than the allowable drinking water standards.
And we're worried about methaprene?
Yeah, right.
Are those lobsters out there glowing?
This just goes through somewhat of what I've already said, that the characteristics of the operation of the sewage treatment plant, the way it recycles sludge and so forth, sort of keeps a constant level in the effluent that comes out of it. Yeah.
Can you go back a slide?
You got a question?
I did.
Can you go back one slide while you're answering?
Yeah.
You're talking about how many orders of magnitude there?
3. It lasts a couple, 8 days.
Half-life is 8 days.
If we look at drinking water exposure, that would be the scenario where it gets into the groundwater.
Yes.
Yeah.
And transit time from a release to an intake would be...
You probably get a foot a day or something like that. So,
but it's on the...
There's water plant. There are water.
On the right range of magnitude.
it is. But you also got to remember, if I didn't say it, think of this as a surrogate for lots of other medical wastes that are in this effluent. There are other radioactive materials that have half-lives that are 50, 60, 1,000 years. There's all sorts of, as you know, pharmaceuticals that are in there that we're worrying about feminization of fish and things like that. So iodine is only used here as sort of a surrogate of the problem. And it's not well regulated. Yeah.
Larry, since you're the scientist, is there any sort of chelates or something like that that can grab some of these things before they get out and then dispose of a different way?
Well, if you're looking at things like metals, a lot of it tends to glom onto the sludge, but radioactivity does not appear to be one of those particular things. So, it depends again on the suite of chemicals that is going through the plant, what's going to be extracted and what isn't. When we did this, I think the highest concentrations in sewage sludge for iodine-131 that have ever been reported in the literature up to the time that we did this about 3 years ago was the Stony Brook University treatment plant. Now, I don't want to create an alarm. Quite frankly, sewage treatment plants are very reluctant to report radioactivity in sewage and sewage sludge because they go out of business if they ever had to report it. So this is something that's just sort of overlooked in the regulatory process.
Larry.
Yeah.
I do have a question, or maybe this is too premature, but aren't there systems that can obliterate, the molecular degree, molecular level of things that technically that radioactivity could be dispelled, if you will, but not necessarily released into the air or anything, but just broken down to such a degree that it's not problematic?
No.
No, they can't do it at Fukushima.
We have probably one of the biggest waste management problems confronting this country is what to do with the hot waste from nuclear power plants. We still don't have a repository for it. And every place that's proposed, whether it's in salt domes in the Gulf of Mexico or Yucca Flats in Nevada, the end result is that we're still keeping it in pools and local communities. And they're really, if you wanted to do some, terrorism, just go after a nuclear power plant.
We'll go after Brookhaven's decommissioned plant where they have the same problem. They're just bottling it and moving it out.
Yeah.
Still in pools, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in pools and moving it out by train.
Seriously.
Yeah, they do.
All right, so sort of in summary about this, an estimated 222 gigabecquerels of iodine is discharged from the university hospital annually for the thyroid cancer treatments. The allowable annual limit for sewage discharges is 37. And because it's hospital waste is not regulated, we're allowed to do that. So there are health risks potentially to treatment plant workers, because they're constantly there being exposed to this, even at very low levels. But the other thing I think we have to worry about, as Tom brought up, is that if this kind of waste is getting into groundwater, we still have people living on the North Shore of Long Island that get their drinking water from groundwater.
I'm one of those people. I have a well.
That's what
that's why it causes all my problems. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say that explains everything.
Okay, now I have a radioactive donut here, so just watch it. Frankly, because I can't stand county water. It's like crap. Okay, my water's sweet, but seriously, here, let me extrapolate something from what you're saying. Stony Brook is talking right now about putting essentially auxiliary sites for disposal of water into a disposal of sludge or treated effluent and things like that into groundwater areas that might be closer to Stony Brook Harbor. Now, as you know, Larry and I used to run the LWRP for villages ahead of the harbor in Suffolk. Stony Brook Harbor is our home waters. It's a significant coastal fish and wildlife habitat. It's one of the most protected areas on the Long Island Sound and one of the cleanest areas. It happens that we know to a fair degree where a lot of the groundwater in the general area ends up in our harbor. I'm going to give you an example from sewer plant 6, which is across the Suffolk River from me. It's a tertiary plant also. They were looking for a disposal site for all their effluent, about 600,000 gallons a day. They found a site it's what's called the uplands.
Science being done about
I can tell you this much. For example, Fukushima right now they have a groundwater problem, and it's carrying the water. Radioactivity is falling into the water. What's the name of the plant? It's Fukushima.
Do you know Gary Halata?
Sorry. Okay. But they are not able to filter it either. Okay, sorry. By the way, Nihongo wa nakanaka muzakashi desu ne. I speak Japanese.
What's your question, Mike?
Okay, the other question then is, if we're getting this kind of radioactivity, what does that do to building on the island and things like that? That's going to start impacting, construction and things like that. We may be overbuilt at this point in time. And again, I'm sort of extrapolating.
Well, I think we're overbuilt whether you're considering medical waste or not.
Yeah.
You know, this is not a great health hazard as is, but if it begins to get in drinking water, so forth, it could be an issue. But I wouldn't lose any sleep over it right now. I think we need to be vigilant and consider these kinds of things as we move forward in planning. Kara?
I ran into a man, that's why I was asking you if you knew Gary Halata, just by happenstance. He's a doctor in the Department of Materials Science and Engineering at Stony Brook.
Yeah, okay.
And he said that he has a background, and this happened to come up because you had mentioned to me that we have the highest concentration of this isotope ever recorded in our sewage treatment plant. And he said that he'd been studying removal of radioactive materials from water and wanted to meet with you. And so I just asked Alyssa to forward me his contact, and I'm going to try to set up a meeting. Maybe we can, work on just what there is.
Okay, good. Glad to.
Great.
So the next thing I want to do is forget the medical waste now. I want to talk about hypoxia.
Our newest problem.
And here's Smithtown Bay. And here's Stony Brook Harbor right here. And if you look at the history of these maps generated by the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection, one of the things that stands out is that Smithtown Bay, even though the surrounding waters aren't hypoxic, virtually every year Smithtown Bay is hypoxic. And the question is why? Because there aren't any real large point sources draining into Smithtown Bay. And so that was one of the things that motivated our study of this. So if you look at what's going in now, first of all, there's 2010 and after 2010. After 2010 represents when Kings Park Sewage Treatment Plant went to tertiary treatment. So before, in tons per year, this is nitrogen, about 8 tons per year going into Smithtown Bay from the Kings Park Sewage Treatment Plant. That's dropped significantly to about 2. These are the groundwater contributions as estimated by the USGS, modified a little bit by myself based on the length of shoreline they considered. Nisqually River is the largest source of nitrogen going into Smithtown Bay. But this is almost trivial. You know, if you can look at what's going in the South Shore from the Bay Park sewage treatment plant, this number would be about 2,300 or so metric tons per year. So, you know, compared to other bodies of water, Smithtown Bay is not getting very much, but yet it's still hypoxic. And so one of the things that we did was that we did a whole series of stations throughout most of the Smithtown Bay area, looking at about 15 stations, and just will give you an idea of what the residual current flow is around Smithtown Bay. And this is Crane Neck, this is Eaton's Neck. And you can think of Smithtown Bay as being a large body of water in which somebody has injected two large breakwaters, Crane Neck and Smithtown Bay. And so the main flow of the sound is coming along this way, and then it reaches these breakwaters and so forth. The currents throughout Smithtown Bay essentially go to zero.
So we should get rid of Eaton's Neck and Crane Neck?
Yeah,
I happen to agree. Those
The Army Corps of Engineers just bolt all them out of the way.
Tom, you're causing my problems. Seriously, though. Seriously, though, there's no tidal, there's no currents cleaning out anything over there.
Okay, this is residual currents. If you look at tidal currents, you know, the same is true. That's the currents inside of Smithtown Bay are very, very weak compared to what's out in the Central Sound.
So that's because you have the North Shore current flowing offshore, basically, and it's to the north of Smithtown Bay. We're an indentation.
That's what I just said.
Yeah. I was agreeing with you.
Speak for yourself. You're an indentation. The rest of us.
So at any rate, you can see that the circulation is extremely complex, very sluggish in here. And, you know, that's basically what's causing the problem. And I just want to show you a little bit. This is, these are dissolved oxygen curves on a couple of those transects. And one of the things that you can see is that by the time you get down to 6-7 meters, the dissolved oxygen concentration drops off considerably. And so during the summer months, particularly July and August, Smithtown Bay becomes hypoxic. And this is another section here as well. And these are the stations. So this one represents the one that's closest to the Nissequogue River. This is the one that's closest to Stony Brook Harbor.
Jay should have hung out a little bit longer.
And here's one of the things, though. This is sort of a side issue, but I knew Kara was going to be here, so I wanted to say that hypoxic water gets to within about 5 meters of the surface in Stony Brook Harbor. Stony Brook Harbor fills from the surface. In other words, as the tide rises, it begins to flow into Stony Brook Harbor, and so we're always getting sort of surface waters going into Stony Brook Harbor as opposed to bottom waters. The significance of that is that if you were to dredge the entrance channel to Stony Brook Harbor to, say, 15 feet and so forth that people have proposed, what you're going to start doing is allowing water at depth to flow into Stony Brook Harbor that will in fact be hypoxic during some times of the year. So that would also degrade water quality there.
Just to let you know, the next dredging cycle, which is coming up in 2 months, they're not touching it.
So I just put a couple of diagrams here. The dark blue represents hypoxic waters, and you can see it's right up against the shoreline in Smithtown Bay, Stony Brook Harbor, and Nissequogue both. And this happens to be 2004. And if you, here's 2009, same general pattern. Very hypoxic close to the shoreline, and then getting better as you go out towards the Central Sound. And this is 2010, same kind of general pattern.
Would that kill off lobsters in the area?
Huh?
Would that kill off lobsters? No, I'm serious about this one. The hypoxic aspect that you're showing, would that kill off lobsters in the area? independent of water temperatures?
I think lobsters are fairly tolerant of low DO water. Bigger problem, I think, is that if we heat the bottom waters. The lobsters begin to die around 23 degrees centigrade, and typically in years past, temperatures have been about 19, 20, but you know, gradually with climate change, those bottom waters are gradually increasing in some parts of the sound. So that's probably a bigger problem.
Do you have data? I'm just curious. Do you have data on those water temperature increases?
Well, I personally don't, but they're out there. The Connecticut DEP runs a whole series of monitoring stations throughout the year. It's there. These are just profiles of density and so forth. So one of the problems in Smithtown Bay is it becomes extremely stratified. And by that I mean you get a layer of fresh, warm water at the surface, cold, salty bottom water. And here, this represents 2010 data, May, June, July, August, or no, I guess it's June, July, August, September. And these are lines of constant density going here, these dashed lines. And these are temperature and salinity measurements with depth. And essentially what this tells you is that it is virtually impossible to mix water in Smithtown Bay during the summer months. It's just too stratified. And so you don't get wind mixing of dissolved oxygen from the atmosphere or from waves at any depth. And this is a consistent pattern that you see. And it doesn't really matter whether it's cool and warm or hot and cold during the summer months. You can see it's just always extremely stratified. And so this inhibits any reoxygenation of bottom waters.
Does this also happen in lacustrine systems? I think I pronounced it properly. Lakes and things like that?
Yeah, except lakes don't have salt.
Aside from that, but the water stratification.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you get, in the winter, that's when the water gets cold and starts to freeze, that's when you get the overturns. This is the same thing, except we got salt. And so this is a typical kind of profile that you might see where we have dissolved oxygen decreasing with depth, and this is density. The thing I wanted to point out here is that this depth is very critical with regard to hypoxia, not only in Smithtown Bay but in Long Island Sound in general. So if this is where the what we call the picnic line, or the gradient between the surface waters and bottom waters, is occurring at this particular station. If it's up here, you will get a different result than if it's down here, and vice versa. So it's very important and very dependent upon the climatic conditions of just what these profiles will look like. And so if you have a very shallow picnic line, you will have a large reservoir of oxygen below the picnic line. You're less likely to have hypoxia. If it's extremely deep, if the picnic line is, if this was down here, you wouldn't get hypoxic conditions as much because the picnic line would bounce off the bottom sometimes during the year or during the summer, and you get total reoxygenation of the water column. So it really, the greatest opportunity for hypoxic conditions in Smithtown Bay is when the water, when the picnic line is somewhere between 30 and 60% of the depth of the water. That's when you get the worst hypoxic conditions. If it's less, you won't get it. And if it's very, very deep, you won't be inclined to get it either. So transferring the effluent from Sewer District 21 doesn't have, in my opinion, very much benefit. It'll increase by a small amount total nitrogen going to Stony Brook Harbor and to Smithtown Bay. Stony Brook Harbor is important again because it's almost a pristine harbor, about as pristine as you can get here. Smithtown Bay is already severely hypoxic in summer, and if we introduce medical waste, we're only going to make the water quality of both the harbor and Smithtown Bay that much worse, and furthermore, people are still drinking. So rerouting Sewer District 21 discharge to groundwater, I think, is a bad idea. I wanted to say it because I don't know how many of us are going to be here in 3 years, but it's important that somebody be aware of it and that we be vigilant. Kara's liable to be state senator by then and forget about us down here. And, Kaufman will probably retire. So somebody in this group ought to remember this and, just be vigilant, make sure that we do the right thing.
Copy of that presentation.
Yes.
But Larry, you didn't answer my question.
What was your question?
Well, I understand that you don't want it discharged into the groundwater or into the pool. What happens when it goes into Port Jeff Harbor, into the Sound? Isn't that also bad?
Flush is better.
It is bad. And actually the county and I and others are at real odds about the nitrogen issue in Port Jefferson Harbor.
Okay.
The county hired a consultant a few years ago to sort of model nitrogen inputs and so forth and utilization in the harbor, and their conclusion was that it went out into Long Island Sound, or a large fraction of it. And that, in many ways, is the basis for the EPA to say that they need to reduce nitrogen from the sewage treatment plant. I have looked at what they did, and this is just me. I don't think it was a very good study, and I think personally there's pretty good evidence that a lot of the nitrogen actually is utilized within the harbor itself and does not get just spewed out into Long Island Sound, creating a bigger problem. I should say Tom's consulting company was not the one that got the job. Other things reside there, and you can see it very nicely. In fact, one of the things that we did was we sampled iodine 131 in seaweed. And you can actually, there's weak evidence that you can see the circulation and the concentrations in seaweed. If you go just to the south and east of the sewage treatment plant, concentrations are very high. If you go to California Beach, which is just north of the sewage treatment plant, the concentrations are quite low. And the circulation in Port Jefferson Harbor is counterclockwise. And so what it's doing is it goes down towards the business district and then comes up on the eastern shore of the harbor and then goes out into Long Island Sound. By the time you get to Oldfield Point, it's almost not measurable in seaweed.
So now reflect back to 2 or 3 months ago when we had the gentleman here describing how he wanted to try to put oysters in the harbor. Think about what those oysters were.
Well, they'll take the iodine out of the water, and then people who eat it, no problem.
So potassium once in a while and be all right.
So, it depends really on what the nature of the material is. Does it tend to glom onto fine sediment particles? Is it dissolved in the water? If it's dissolved in the water, is it utilized? Will oysters take it up? So there's not a blanket statement that you can make about
this chart.
Right.
Okay.
So I just want to
make a blanket statement that says revisit and always reopen source reduction.
Yes.
To your earlier point, Mary, it's all about, okay, let's stop looking at the end of the pipe and work our way back up and say, is it actually necessary? Yeah, it turns out quite a few of these things are necessary to do. They are unfortunately get concentrated. Other things are not so necessary. The report that Larry and I just did on the South Shore comes out with a wacky idea that I put in there, I won't go into it here, but that really gets all the way to the source and could be better than anything you could put
Well,
into the plant.
and when we have these discussions, and I'm not a scientist, I'm very naive and disagree, but every time someone fertilizes their lawn, isn't this a removable source?
So now I will tell you the answer.
Okay.
Because I wrote the report with Larry and others, which puts onto a pie chart the relative importance of golf courses and lawns and atmospheric deposition.
Yeah.
Turns out we are driving less. People are driving more efficient cars. And power plants are cleaning up their stats. The atmospheric deposition is sliding down really fast. It's really interesting. It's very encouraging to see that.
That's great.
But one other thing about that is just so choices that people are making economically on efficiency of their cars, and generationally people are just saying, I don't need a car. So that's a good thing, fine. But it's at the source, right? If that's what's happening. That pie chart of what's going into Great South Bay, lawns are like 6 or 8%. All right, so let's beat the crap out of everybody that goes to Home Depot and does fertilizer. By the way, half of them don't do it wrong. And in fact, fertilizer is shown to decrease runoff if you do it correctly. So really only half of them are messing it up. So let's really beat up on those. And it's like nothing happens. So go back to where the pie chart, 88% of that pie chart is stuff coming out of that Bay Park plant.
It is. Okay.
Who is that?
That's what I wanted.
Who is that?
To know.
That's everybody. That's us.
That's us. Right.
What can we do about the Bay Park plant?
Right.
Well, it turns out in Europe, or even in the United States, there are things you can do to change what you flush and head towards Bay Park. If you eat more efficiently, just like if you drive a car more efficiently, and we're not here yet, but in 10 years, I'll come back and say, I told you so. People won't do anything, change their eating behaviors on behalf of Great South Bay, on behalf of nitrogen and nitrification and hypoxia. But they will do it if it costs less.
That's right.
People will drive different cars
That's right.
if it costs less. It turns out if you eat a certain way and have a certain microbiota in your gut, you can double the efficiency of your protein uptake. And therefore decrease by 30 or 40% the nitrogen and the protein that passes through you and hits the Bay Park. You can squeeze down that pie chart of load massively just by following Jamie Lee Curtis and doing probiotics. Period. But is anybody going to do that on behalf of Great South Bay? No.
No, but they will do it on their health.
But if we can get
And the
some
pocketbook.
campaigns indirectly that go to schools or get people to listen to Dr. Oz or Oprah and just eat some of this stuff, it's 22 cents. It's like 66 cents a week per person. It's just, it doesn't change taste. There's no downside to doing it. I'm obviously obsessed about it. But the point is, if you could spend money, if you spend money on how people alter their nutrition and diet and their digestion, you will do more than engineers can do in a treatment plant for decades. Now you have to keep at it, but people will do it if they realize it gets you. The benefits of probiotics are such a long list. It's just kind of like becoming fatty now. But as it sticks, we're going to see that same kind of atmospheric deposition going down, down, down. People will be wondering, what the hell? Why is this stuff coming to the field? Because people are eating.
Out of curiosity, Tom, the study of probiotics, are they basically based on getting them naturally in yogurts, let's say, or are they based on buying probiotic capsules?
You can do either. Some of the capsules are junk. Some of them do make it, but it's fermented foods in concert with, and it's not always probiotics, it's prebiotics that get them ready. But the basic point I wanted to make is, as a council, we're trying to do this at the right level and the right scale, and it's way late if you're trying to put a screen on the end of a pipe and say, please stop this. But if we could figure out ways to affect the behaviors and the incentives back at the source, we'll have altered the dilemma a little bit.
Is there more nitrogen in meat than there are in vegetable products? In terms of what's excreted?
Yeah, meat eaters aren't as efficient and hanging on to what they can. Vegetarians aren't perfect either, of course, but I'm not a vegetarian. But to prove that it's all in Europe. Europeans are willing to study their feces and figure this stuff out. But in the U.S., we actually have passed laws that say if you have a cattle farm, if you have a hog farm, if you have a chicken farm, you need to feed those guys probiotics.
Wow.
Because the stuff that goes down the street and into the rivers, we need to decrease that load, and it turns out to work. They just passed the law and said, this is a hammer. We're done.
Good.
Well, short of Tom changing their diet.
I'm just kind of turning you on to what could improve
Well, it's also improves your health.
Your 5K times will go down. Your BMI will alter. It just is good for so many more reasons than the one I'm talking about.
I think one of the questions we still have to grapple with in this committee, and we have started, is how many people can Long Island house? And, I think, I've said before, I think we've reached our saturation point. And, I'm an employee of Stony Brook University, but until the EPA and Suffolk County come up with a solution to the problem, it seems to me that the university has got to start looking at being constrained in how many students they can have. I mean, we can't be a 50,000 student campus like University of Michigan for no other reason than we can't deal with getting rid of our sewage under the present conditions. So.
Interesting.
Yes, thank you very much, Larry. Members, I would like to propose, perhaps Nick, you can help with this embassy, to have the September meeting in Hubbard Park. You can do that? Mary Ann and Rich have both mentioned it, and with your help, if you could arrange that.
What's the date for it?
September 16th, is that the Wednesday?
And if not that, then October? Why don't we give them a try?
It's actually the 18th.
18th.
October might be colder.
It might get a little chilly, yeah. So let's shoot for September.
Okay.
Can be worked out.
We should make hot chocolate.
Cold chocolate if it's warm.
Well, we have to announce it. We have to get public notice.
Yeah.
In time.
Oh, yeah. So
Also, and everyone, if this comes to pass, should add time to going out there because the entrance is not marked. And if you've not been there before, you won't find it.
Can't you stand out there, Mary?
Somebody could put a flag out.
Buy a balloon.
And which entrance are we going?
We're going to Smithers.
Smithers.
Okay, so this is,
Right.
Yeah.
you make a little map. And
Yeah, Smithers.
Email us the GPS.
Something that
With
the
the balloon.
We'll put a balloon.
yeah, something. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yes. Go ahead, my friend.
I was speaking to Rich McTagg yesterday, and he sends his regards to everyone. And something popped up. The reason he was forced to resign is because of the dialysis schedule that he's on, and it's very, very inflexible. It's Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays. He's doing very well on the dialysis. He's had some. It's a tough procedure, but he's doing very, very well with it. And he did make a comment that, he's retired, but he did have a lot of fun at CEQ. He kept his hand in the game and things like that. As you know, I'm reluctant to lose members from the group. I've always felt that we are a sort of band of brothers, whether we agree or disagree internally. I'm just throwing this one out. I don't want to lose Rich, and I made the suggestion by telephone to Gloria that we possibly move the meeting dates that we have. We're right now wedded to Wednesdays, but there's nothing in the charter, there's nothing actually saying that it's Wednesdays. I was going to suggest that to accommodate Rich, we possibly meet on Tuesdays or Thursdays, and therefore we might be able to get him back. So I just wanted to bring that up and have people think about it. I thought Rich brought a very good presence to the table. He had a lot of gravitas. He had excellent institutional knowledge and a lot of operational knowledge, and I was just very, very sad to see him go because of the dialysis. So I don't.
Have you asked him if the date would change, would he come back?
I did not directly ask him that one, but given the tenor of the conversation, I did ask, well, let me talk to Gloria, and just it was sort of amorphous. Nothing was agreed to or anything like that, and it just happened on the spur of the moment. I was seeing how he was doing. He lives right near where I work, and I just wanted to throw it out to the group and see what happens. Originally, from what I understand, Wednesday was just chosen because it was the middle of the week. Again, there's no imperative as to the actual day. And I figured Tuesday or Thursday is still sort of the middle of the day, middle of the week. So.
The legislators' calendar is probably pretty regular. That could be important.
Yeah,
well, Tuesdays would be harder, but committee weeks generally are Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, not Thursdays.
So that is basically
it's
pointing us
possible.
to Thursday, if Rich doesn't want to come back.
And we'd have to check with Kara and things like that. But I know, EPA meets on Mondays. She's on, I think, 2 other committees, if I remember correctly. We would have to check. So I just wanted to throw that one out there.
He'd have to be reappointed.
Yeah, he's gone through it once. That's more of a formality more than anything else. But I just wanted to get a sense of the group, think about it. I'm not even asking for anything.
Yeah, just think about it. And Mike, do speak with him and ask him directly if he would consider coming back before we start making any changes.
No.
Well, if he would, consider,
I know how to
the council would have changed the day, then we wouldn't have to do that unless he was reappointed.
Yes, that's right. But let's find out if he's interested in coming back first.
Well, I can tell you, I teach Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I couldn't do Tuesdays.
Yeah, but who cares?
That's what I was worried about. Okay, so I thought
Somebody's got to be here to keep you in line.
Yeah, Larry, you don't do it very well. All right, so
let's
another reappointment.
rough schedule, only Tuesdays and Thursdays?
Yes, and I was afraid about it. But I was afraid of that. I thought there might be a conflict.
All right, that was where I was going to go next. Does anyone
But
have any
it might
conflicts?
be a vacuum argument in as much as no one's talked to Rich to see if he feels well enough to come back.
Well,
So why don't we?
The tenor was possible. Again, I didn't ask him, would you come back? But that was kind of the tenor of the conversation.
I
But
don't
if he
want
can't
to
do
lose
it, I can't
Larry.
do that.
Mike, what day do you have?
Me either.
I'm sorry?
All righty, is there a motion to close the meeting?
Adjourn.
Seconded by Eva, all in favor,
Motion to
aye.
kick Larry's butt.
Motion closed. Motion closed.
Thank you, Larry.